All right, can you all hear me? Give a little thumbs up in the chat if you can hear me. We're just waiting for Molly, and then we will get ready to rock and roll. Can you all hear me? Somebody do like a yes in the chat or a thumbs up just to make sure my audio is working. Thank you, Taylor. It's like talking to yourself. Just never know if anybody's listening.
Hello,
Hey,
can you hear me okay?
yes, ma'am. How are you?
I am good. How are you?
Good. What a good time of the year to be in Austin, Texas, and get all that vitamin D in your life. Holy
Oh
cow!
my God, I know. Totally. It's so funny because so we were just traveling forever. Like I'm actually now as a result taking like a whole hold on how much traveling I've been doing. But I will say one thing that was really nice about it was that I got to skip a lot of the Austin heat.
Yes, it
Like
is.
I know. But we so
It
we
is
just
hot.
came back recently and it's like, "Oh my God. It has
Yeah,
been
it's funny because my wife and kids spent all summer in Wisconsin, and so I thought we like planned it perfectly. But June and July were pretty weak this year in Texas. But Austin is hot. It is hot right now. I mean,
totally
really hot.
really hot." I know.
Yeah.
Exactly. So now Blake and I, so he's been doing 15,000 steps a day is his new thing. I've been doing around 10,000 steps a day, but so because of it, it's like how do you find the time to be outside that is not like a sauna? So we've been doing mornings and then later at night has been like our situation, but I know it's killer.
It's warm. It's warm, but it's almost fall. I
It's
can
almost
feel it.
fall.
I can feel it.
Exactly.
And
We literally just had
105,
this
I can feel
conversation
it.
yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah.
My a friend of mine just sent a screenshot of the weather ahead, and she was like, "A cold front's coming in because it's gonna be like 99 this
Yeah.
weekend, something, you know." So,
Yeah, I got my sweatshirts out. It's gonna be chilly. It's gonna
yeah,
be
it's
chilly.
chilly. Totally. Oh my God, so funny.
Well,
I still need to
well,
get to your area, by the way.
I
To
know I gotta have you and we gotta have you and Blake out. We just had the first calf at the ranch and zebra's coming in October now. So yeah, we gotta have you all out.
Oh my God, what a lifestyle. I need
It
to see this.
is.
That sounds
It's
incredible.
fun. It's
So
fun.
cool.
Well, look, I know we're gonna have people logging in. We've got a couple hundred people that have registered for this, so it should be
Amazing.
fun. And then people will get the recording if they're not on, so that's
Yeah.
great. But I'm super honored to be with you. I've had the privilege of meeting you from a good mutual friend, Bob Castellini, and
Oh,
you've
the best.
spoken to the GoBundance community multiple times now and delivered some incredible messages. And your husband Blake has done the same. And as I'm on this journey of health and abundance and just trying to like live my best life, one of the things I'm recognizing is how important sleep is. And I know you know this already because you've been on this journey and you're the founder of Sleep is a Skill, and you've figured out and mastered hopefully the sleep. And so I'm just really grateful to be on today with you and have others be able to learn from you and understand really how sleep and more importantly, their actions they're taking during the day lead to their sleep and that how that sort of breeds momentum in your life. So I'd love to start off with you just introducing yourself, how you got into this whole sleep space, what excites you about it, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. Such a fan of the Go Abundance kind of world and conversations that I've had with just about every member that I have interacted with. It just has been absolutely incredible. So grateful to be in
Yeah.
this kind of sphere. And this is my favorite topic. So the topic of sleep, I truly believe, is completely transformative. And I do believe it is a skill because I believe that it's something that ongoingly will continue to improve upon, and we're never done. I was sharing that I was just traveling so often, and so seeing like, oh, the travel and the hit on sleep. So then have to keep recreating how to manage your life as life gets bigger. And I think this is the group that we're speaking to, that we're not putting a cap on what's possible to have some perfect sort of sleep all the time either. We're going to be having big lives, and we're going to have to keep course correcting, over time, to really have it work. And so the story for me is of a personality of someone that was a serial entrepreneur in Manhattan for many years, burning the candle at both ends, stressed to the max. And what ended up happening for me was this period of insomnia that completely changed my life. It was such a kind of rock bottom period, and truly a scary period of, am I stuck like this? What is this going to look like? I would go down forums and hear all these stories of people talking about having insomnia for 20, 30, years and more. And so just this fear that, did I flip some sort of switch and now I'm stuck this way? And the journey for me of really diving into what does it take to get great sleep consistently night after night, not just from like a philosophical musing, but because I really had to figure this thing out, was the kind of this opportunity. Now I see it as one of the biggest blessings of my life. At the time, I didn't see it like that. But now I know that it actually opened the doors to this opportunity to really see, okay, what does it take to manage your life in such a way that your days set you up powerfully for a restorative night of sleep? And that's kind of the message that I'd like to get across too, is that your how you are by day gets mirrored in the nights. And that's really a place to bring in some power, because ultimately, if we are stressed to the max and things aren't working in our lives, then it's probably going to bleed into our sleep. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that. We're all going to have periods where we're growing and developing. And so, what really we see here at Sleep as a Skill is that sleep is a barometer of the workability of your life. And so, as entrepreneurs, as people taking on these big things, we get to really start to check in continually and build this muscle.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think what you said is so spot on is like the actions we take during the day are what's going to breed or yield good quality sleep. And many of us, including me, discount that as we check our emails at 9:30 and then try to go to bed at 10. So
Totally.
what I'd love to start with is I kind of try to make everything simple, Molly. And so for me, it's like there's two sleep issues.
Yeah.
There's a trouble falling asleep, and then there's trouble staying asleep. So
Yeah.
from your perspective, I'm sure it's much more complex, but from those two scenarios, the people that are listening to this that have troubles with either falling or staying asleep, what sort of tips or action items do you have that are just very basic for them to recognize how to either course correct the falling or course correcting the staying asleep, and that they can apply today, tomorrow, tonight, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say that a few things. One, sleep is complex and there are so many things to address. And I love that you're kind of breaking it down to this difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, because ultimately, one of the most popular reasons that people come my way are because of those two reasons. They're struggling in some way, shape, or form there. So, what I would say is that there's a few things that we'd want to make sure we're addressing. First, I will get out of the way that I am definitely biased, that I would like to see a future where every single one of us are tested for sleep disorders, not just once, but multiple times throughout our life. And part of that is that it's so easy to do nowadays. It's like truly no reason not to do it, and affordable too. So whether it's two companies that I recommend a lot, and the first one I do have a relationship with, but the second one I have no relationship with, and yet just really want to get these messages out that it's so easy. So the first one is Lofta, and that's a at-home sleep test. The second one is Empower Sleep, and I recommend those or any company that you can get your hands on that will have an at-home test available to you. Why? Because there are over 100 sleep wake disorders that are present that many of us are running around undiagnosed. Now, the at home tests are going to be particularly proficient in checking for things like sleep apnea, especially, or maybe giving us clues that something else might be at play. But you can do this for like in one night for under $200 for most of these. So there's really not a lot of reasons or barriers to not getting this tested for. And the amount of people that I speak with that even, and I'm sure the listeners too, could experience this where they might be saying, well, that's not for me. That's for someone else that looks a totally different way or has a totally different lifestyle. I'm telling you, the amount of people that have sleep disorders that they just don't realize, it's crazy. And what can become available is just a total transformation, not just in your sleep, but your health and your life as a result. So I always want to make sure we're not stepping over possible sleep disorders. Some of the signs that might come up on wearables, if people are testing, or even if you're not testing, some things that might show up are, frequent awakenings throughout the course of the night, and it can balloon into some of this trouble of falling asleep as well. If we're having that insufficient sleep, maybe anxiety levels go up, etc. But in addition to that, we might see things like waking up feeling really fatigued, even after maybe a full night of sleep. Are you falling asleep throughout the day or feel like you could fall asleep throughout the day? Headaches, grinding of your teeth. Also, we see for a lot of people that if they're having weight gain, sort of like weight around the stomach and other things, that this could be kind of this possible chicken or the egg, that this is actually impeding our kind of our hormone balance and a number of other things. So first, I would make sure we address that. Then after that piece, then we want to look at a really boring recommendation, but it makes such a difference, which is consistent wake up time. Consistent wake up time. And I'm saying specifically wake up time for a reason. I say that because that's an area that we have a say over. Now, when we fall asleep, as we pointed to, some people, or in particular, might really struggle with that one for stretches of time. So we don't want to put that pressure, performance anxiety, any of that sort of stuff there. So instead, we all have a say on when we wake up in the morning. So what we want to do is determine what is our consistent wake up time, not just 5 days a week, 4 days a week, whatever, but 7 days a week, including the times when you don't have to get up for anything. And a lot of people I find say, oh, that's not for me. Tell me the next tip, because I'm doing that basically. But then we look at their stats, and so commonly we're still seeing these peaks and valleys. And even 1 or 2 nights throughout the course of the week can be the equivalent of creating sort of what they call social jet lag, which is like you didn't get on a plane, but now you're experiencing jet lag in many symptoms, including this multi-night, often difficulty in falling asleep or staying asleep. So those would be two things that I would first address, and then there's a whole slew more.
And would you mind repeating those two companies again?
Sure. So Lofta, and Lofta, Lofta. So that would be a one-night test. They can send it to you super quick. We have a partnership with them. So Sleep is a Skill gets you a discount. I'm just saying this for anyone that has hindrance, just of getting in there. I'm telling you, it's fast, easy. The second one is Empower Sleep. And what's nice about them is they send you just a little ring, and they're also using HRV, heart rate variability. And Matt, I know you've talked about heart rate variability. We can
Yeah.
talk about that if helpful. And they're using that, and it's one of the few FDA cleared devices that is utilizing HRV. So it gives us a little bit more information about the quality of your sleep, and you're getting multiple nights with Empower Sleep, and then you can go over your sleep results, often with a Harvard trained sleep physician as well. So those would be two places of at home. And if we suspect even more might be at play, if you're like, oh, you know what? I think I might have restless leg, periodic limb movement disorder. Um, maybe you've done other tests and you still feel like something's up, then you could potentially look at either in lab, or you could get something called the Onera test, which is a newer test. And that's kind of our best in between that can test for more than just the standard test. It's a little more expensive though.
So what's your consistent wake up time? I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Yes, totally. So, well, what mine is always around the sun. So, what happens there is I use what I call well, not I call, but what I can tell you about is called the Circadian Life app. Highly recommend anyone getting this app. It's free. Download it. And what happens is then you start to get really attuned to when sunrise is in your environment. And then beyond that, though, it's not just sunrise in your environment for sunrise sake. It's also then getting awareness of things like UVA light and when that's present, and some of the actual benefits that could be there from a circadian perspective, as well as UVB. So when we're talking about vitamin D deficiency, which is an epidemic, and so many people, unbeknownst to them, are having difficulties with their sleep because of low vitamin D. And so this is an app that can tell you exactly where, geotag you where you are. And so it will say, what are the times for you to get outside to take advantage of that UVB? And for how long do you need to be out there?
So do you adjust your wake up time based on where you're at? So like if you're in Austin, is your wake up time different than New York?
Good question. So sometimes, and so this is the frustrating answer, I'd say, for a lot of things with sleep, is that it does depend on a couple of things. So one, so right now in Austin, the sunrise time is about 7 a.m., right? So we might, so for me, I have my wake up time right around then routinely. But then if I'm going, for instance, sometimes I'll go to conferences, say, and I'm going to be on a totally different time zone. And I know the lineup of that conference is going to be skewing later. What are some of the things that mean it's skewing later? I know that we're going to be having later dinners. Maybe I'll indulge, have a drink or two. Now that I know how much alcohol affects sleep over the years, I've had
Yeah.
infinitely less. But if I know I'm going to be indulging or whatever, then there might be times when I know I want to skew a little bit later for whatever's going to be on the plate, and I want to be at my best performance or what have you, to be able to be present for whatever I got to do, if it's like podcasts, presentations, etc. So I might design things so that maybe it skews a little bit later, or I might design things so it skews earlier, especially if it's just a few days. So I would say that there are considerations. We see this with athletes all the time, because say if they're going to need to be really at their peak at whatever, 7 p.m., 8 p.m., then we might be adjusting some of their habits and behaviors to meet those demands.
And I always thought that HRV was like a golf score. Like I always thought the lower the better, right? And maybe that was just delusional because my numbers are always so low, and I wanted to feel good about myself. But for the person listening to this that has no idea what HRV is and why they should be tracking it, could you give the short answer of what it is, why it's important, and how you can be tracking it?
Totally. Such a good question. And I really think that it is one of the metrics that can bring us a lot of insight into, especially as entrepreneurs, too, from a perspective of where are we headed? Are we heading towards, are we able to handle the stressors that are present in our lives from multi level? So, not just psychological stressors, but physiological stressors, environmental, et cetera. So what is it? Well, heart rate variability is the time between the heartbeats. So, and it's looking, because it has the word variability in the title, we know that it is supposed to exhibit variability.
Right.
And one of the things that's supposed to be present is its tremendous agility at responding to the things that are present for your physiology. So, meaning if suddenly you just throw a big workout into there, how well can your body respond second to second to second to help recover? So, it's really a metric of recovery in such a quick time frame. And so, what's really cool about it is um, that we can actually help ourselves. And I know it can be challenging, but kind of be devoid of comparison, because it can be so tempting to compare despair
Yeah.
around, well, this other person has like, 120. And what does this mean about me? I'm like 17 or something. So instead, what we want to discover is our baseline. And then from our baseline, start to see when we're trending away from that baseline, and we can learn things about both. So if it's going above or it's going below for an extended period of time, not just like a 1 or 2 day thing, because we do want to ensure that we're not going down the rabbit hole of getting at the effect of these numbers, and that can be a problem for a lot of people. But if we see, so we've had a number of HRV experts on the podcast. If people want to learn more, definitely check out a few of those. We have Dr. Jay Wiles, who has a whole podcast around HRV. I've been on the Elite HRV podcast. We've had other experts on as well if you want to check out more. But a couple rules of thumb that many of them seem to agree upon is when you see yourself dropping around 20% or so, that can just be a sign that you could see, and that's over a stretch of time, like a trend around 20%
Yeah.
drop. That can be a sign for us that, okay, something's impeding our ability to recover. Start investigating in our kind of lifestyle. Is there something that we could do to help facilitate our body's ability to recover? And these are nighttime metrics, by the way. So this is in your nighttime as well.
Right.
Uh, but then if it drops 40% or more, the thinking is that that's almost like an invisible stop sign that for ourselves to really check in and see, okay, something's up. Am I getting sick? Is there, egregious psychological stressors, environmental stressors, physiological stressors? And so that can be a time where we really want to prioritize recovery, help take some of the things off our plate if we are seeing that come up again and again. And then on the flip side, when we see it doing the opposite, if it's starting to go kind of above our baseline, what can be really neat is that we can start to ascertain what's going on in that arena, like what's happening in our life that we could help bring more of into our lifestyle routinely. Common things that I see um, might be when people, whatever, the kids go back to school or something,
Yeah.
it's like there's like a reduction in stressors. Sometimes when people go on big kind of vacations for long stretches of time, that one's a little dicey, because typically when we see short-term travel, often you can expect that your HRV is going to go down with travel and stressors. But if for a long stretch of time and you're able to kind of bring in some routines and workability, sometimes we will see that kind of vacation effect, where when we're reducing stressors and getting to kind of be, then it's a really cool reflection that we can see how that shows up in our physiology. So there's a lot there and a lot to peel back. Now, if you're someone that's really wanting to take on your HRV, a few kind of gadgets or gizmos that might be of interest. One is called Leaf, LIEF. And so Leaf is about almost like a pacemaker. I shouldn't say a pacemaker. It's almost like a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, but for your HRV. So it's consistently and continually checking in on your HRV, and then pretty much color coding you and sending you a bit of a vibration at times when you are more stressed. So that can help you so that you can start doing, what is the fastest way to change your HRV is breath. So changing your how you're breathing, we know that that's one of the quickest ways in the immediacy to shift that. So, I work with a lot of high stakes poker players as part of my sort of niche that I work in. So I have a ton of high stakes poker players at the table that are, unbeknownst to anyone else, getting buzzed at different points when they are getting stressed, so that they can adjust how they're relating to the situation, the stressors at hand, and then change in their breathing. And there are other short-term things that you can do. So like dehydration is a really boring but common reason for a drop in HRV. So maybe they're dehydrated, maybe they're getting overly hot, et cetera, et cetera. So then you can just start to be more attuned to your physiology. So that would be one. And then another one is called Moonbird, and that one is kind of this little meditation trainer, if you will, slash breath trainer, and that will track your HRV by day in little sessions that you can start to get clear on, oh, this is what it feels like to feel in that stressed and shallow breathing state. And then also what it feels like to kind of slow all that down and kind of shift that so that over time, you can especially use that in the times when you really need it, including sleep, including when we're frustrated and now it's 3 a.m. and we can't fall back asleep. We got a big day. We can utilize those techniques.
And a lot of people use the Whoop or the Aura Ring.
Yes.
Everybody has their favorites like Nike or Adidas. What's your perspective on sort of like the different HRV information you can receive from these gadgets? I mean, I know when I spoke to you previously, you were an Aura Ring fan, but benefits of Whoop, benefits of Aura Ring, what you're seeing there, and what you would suggest people use.
Yeah, really good. And listen, I am such a fan of data, so I have just about every tracker on the market. So I totally understand. And I will say that the two that I do recommend right now are both Aura and Whoop. So those are two high caliber trackers. Now, I know there's a lot of new tech coming, so stay tuned because that might change in the future. But as of right now, those two are fantastic. And I'd say a couple different things. So one, if if you are someone that's using both, which I have a lot of clients that use both, my caution would be when comparing wearables and the data between the two, because we know that commonly we'll see lots of different readouts with each one. And so we want to instead just stay within each tracker and get a sense of what our baselines are within each one and just utilize their algorithm within there. And I would also caution people from making too many major life choices. One thing that we saw with Oura Ring just a little bit ago was that they changed their algorithm quite substantially around sleep stages. So if anyone's been using the Oura Ring, they've likely seen that if they've been using it for more than like a year and change. There was a dramatic change in the algorithm. And so people went from whatever, 3 hours of deep sleep down to like an hour of deep sleep. And it can be an example of how much these algorithms can shift the data. But usually they'll have to make a kind of announcement around that and you can kind of course correct accordingly. But with things like HRV, what you're likely to see, and I see this kind of set up with a lot of people, is they're using, say, like 8Sleep, which is also tracking HRV, and they're known to be accurate. All three of these are known to be quite fairly accurate within the way that they're tracking and testing of your data. It's just that they have different increments of when they're pulling this data for you consistently throughout the course of the night. So it's fairly accurate based on all three are fairly accurate based on what they are pulling. So instead, just look at what you're utilizing and then see what your baseline is. And if you want to get some comparison, I will tell you that things like Aura and Whoop will tell you how you're stacking up on things like HRV against others. So this is probably one of my most shared things. I'll put it in the chat if helpful. This one is with Oura Ring and showing average HRV numbers amongst users. So you just get a sense of where you're performing. And Whoop has other kind of blogs as well that you can get a sense of how you're performing against the masses. Additionally, Whoop does have its AI coach on there. So you can go in there and also ask questions around your HRV and your performance.
Yeah, me and that coach don't get along right now. We're at odds. But that's okay.
Really? What's happening?
We'll get through it. So, no, what's interesting is, right, I was comparing the other day my HRV to some friends. And if you look at my Whoop, my 6-month trend, my HRV is 23. My 1-month trend, my HRV is 23. But my 1-week trend, my HRV is 24. Now, I have friends who are like 89, 87, 94. I'm like, oh, that must be nice. Like that looks really fun. But, what's interesting, and I think you alluded to this, is don't get lost in comparing your numbers to others.
Oh,
Get
totally.
lost in comparing your numbers to your baseline. And last week, for instance, I did an 86-hour fast, and I just tried to pay more attention to how my body responded to foods after that fast, but more importantly, how my sleep responded. And so a lot of us are guilty of having that sweet tooth after dinner, right? And I'm guessing, but I don't know this for a fact, that most of the data says to avoid that little sweet tooth or stop eating after a certain amount of time. So as you're coaching people, what sort of basic things are you asking that they implement in their life and then obviously track to make sure that they're seeing the results they want to try to get better sleep? And better sleep might be more than just HRV. I get that. But
Yeah.
for the person listening to this that goes, man, I feel like I'm in sleep debt, which I would love to talk to you a little bit about later, but
Sure.
I'm in sleep debt. What can I do today to try to get out of this debt just a little bit? What advice or what little hacks would you give them?
Yeah. Okay. So I think it can make a lot of sense to step back and see what are some of these fundamentals that appear to make such a significant difference for most people. And that's one of the cool things for us with the people we're working with, because now for so many years, every person we've been working with has been utilizing the Aura Ring. So we've been able to see just countless amounts of data of what can really start to move the needle and what's just sort of barely a blip. And I will say this is often a bad news insight for a lot of people. Commonly, just generic sleep aids are one of the least effective or things that show up. Like I just have the time, couldn't even tell you when people start taking some of those and don't when looking at their stats. So instead, what are some of the things that really move the needle? Well, one, most of them are free and behavioral and environmental in nature. So if we step back, one, we always have people start with their light dark environment. And part of that is because if we're thinking of their circadian health, that our number one zeitgeber or time giver is our light dark relationship. And what's cool though is not even just from like, oh yeah, I've heard something about I should get bright light and maybe dim the lights in the evening, that instead there's more to it than that. And it does allow for kind of a blueprint on how to organize your life so that you have more kind of up energizing type activities when it's light out. Almost think of yourself as like Amish or something so that
Right,
you have
right.
a certain period of time. It's almost a productivity hack where you're trying to get a lot of the things done that you need to get done that require a lot of energy throughout the course of the day when the sunlight is out. But then when the sun is starting to set, you can use that cue as a guide for when we're kind of winding down, when we are putting away the emails and, kind of the excitatory shows or whatever we might be doing that might be amping us up. So, but what does this look like? So, one, we want to bare minimum make sure that when we're waking up at that consistent wake up time, that's that anchor habit. Our other anchor habit with that is that we're getting up and out, ideally within about 5 minutes of waking. So no like lounging or what have you. But instead we're up and falling out of bed outside almost. So getting ourselves outside as quickly as possible, getting that bright light in our eyes. And that will have so many benefits from turning off any lingering melatonin. If you are someone that is dealing with sleep debt, like you spoke to, or maybe has been have some variability in their sleep timing, or maybe they've been traveling or they're stressed or whatever, then getting outside and getting that bright light in our eyes is part of the formula to one, training ourselves. This is called circadian rhythm entrainment. And this is a whole approach. So you're in training these clocks that are in every cell and organ of your body to all be kind of functioning at the right times. And what we're dealing with is kind of chronic dysregulation, all these clocks being off kilter and not timing correctly. So if we get ourselves physically outside, we're aiming for at least around 10 to 20 minutes in the beginning is our goal, just to establish that habit. And then if you can get yourself outside longer later on in the morning, for a walk or however you want to set up that scheduling, do that, because now you're turning off that melatonin. You're helping to boost more of those kind of feel good response that we know comes from the sun. And so that brings about what we see is this serotonin to melatonin kind of creation. But particularly one of the things that comes about is for sleep, we need to have sufficient vitamin D, and vitamin D is that precursor to serotonin, which is a precursor to melatonin. So you need to be getting that light, not just in the morning, but later on in the day too. So what you're doing is setting yourself up to have those brighter days and then markedly darker nights. And this could sound like, yeah, next. But what we see is that just last year, there were nearly 250 circadian scientists. Their entire reputation is on the line, and they all banded together calling for warning labels on light bulbs when used at night. And they did that citing nearly 2,700 peer reviewed publications on the negative impacts of light at night, faux light at night, not just on sleep, but also on things like diabetes, reproductive disorders, psychiatric disorders, obesity, and of course, sleep wake. So there's massive implications from having this dysregulation. So the simplest thing is brighter days, darker nights. And how can we then have our behaviors align with that? Now, one of the other big behaviors I'll say next below that is temperature. So we want to have warmer temperature by day, markedly cooler by night. That's one of the reasons why, of any investment in our sleep, I often recommend these cooling mattress toppers. So Chili, 8. Some people like bed jet, different things, whatever you're going to do to get the cooler in your bed, we do see make a measurable difference on our sleep results. Um, and also ambient temperature being cooler than most people realize. So the recommendations between 60 to 67 degrees in your bedroom, which for many people, it's still higher than that. But then the next thing I'd also mention that is probably one of the harder for most people to implement is meal timing, which you alluded to. And so we're looking to largely be eating when the sun is out and really giving ourselves a digestive break when the sun has set.
It's interesting because like I talk a lot about the ranch that I bought, right? And the chickens are a great example of this. When the
Yeah.
sun comes up, they're all pecking at the coop door ready to get out. And when the
Yeah.
sun is about to go down, they're all racing back to the coop, or they were before they got eaten by coyotes, but they're all racing to get back into the coop, right?
Yes.
Because they know from a circadian perspective, that's how their bodies are wired. And so they're most active in the day and then they sleep at night. And what I'm curious to learn is, and Thomas alluded to this in the chat, is
Yes.
some of us only have so many hours in a day. Well, all of us only have so many hours in a day.
Sure.
And some of us are trying to maximize those hours, meaning we wake up at Thomas's 3:30, I'm 4:17. So, my routine right now is to stand in front of the refrigerator and get as much bright light from the refrigerator as I possibly can at 4:17, which I'm sure is the terrible idea, right? But for Thomas's question, for somebody that's waking up super early, maybe they're an early shifter on duty for police or whatever it might be. How do you suggest they go about getting that sun or getting that light early in the day when the sun is still hours away from coming up?
Oh, yeah. That's such a good question. I'm glad both Thomas and yourself are hitting on this because we hear this one all the time. Now, I spoke to this kind of aligning yourself with the rhythms of nature, rising with the sun and the whole thing. But so many of us can't do that, don't want to do that. It's just not on the table. So, what do we do when we're waking up earlier? Um, well, there are two kind of camps on this, I will say. So there is, from a particularly sort of circadian perspective, you will hear many people recommend that you wake up and then you just douse yourself in blue light. So kind of you're getting that very clear message to the nervous system and to the body and to our circadian rhythm that it is time to wake up and take on our day. And there's research to support that can often help with phase advancing so that you're getting sleepier earlier in the evening, which for many people it could be advantageous because what many of us are doing is doing the opposite and we're
Right.
phase delaying and then not getting sleepy till later. And this kind of touches to what you had said before about like, what do we do if we're having trouble falling asleep? Well, it's maybe counterproductive or counterintuitive, but it's about how you start your day and what the light is. So there is one camp that looks at that bright light first thing in a faux way. You're using man-made options. Now, there is another camp that's kind of in this quantum biology space and looking at the fact that well, we've only had faux light options for about 150 years since Edison created the light bulb. So, what do we do for all those thousands and thousands of years before that? Well, in those cases, what we would have done is maybe like candlelight, lanterns, very gentle light options. So you will see a lot of kind of biohackers or people that are looking to be more aligned with these rhythms of nature do a little bit, use this a little bit differently and use red light in the morning until you get to align yourself with the actual sunrise. Um, so that would be a slightly different approach. What I would say is if you want a happy medium, and especially if you're a shift worker, there's certain times where shift workers just, they need to have faux interventions. So there's one company that I do recommend called Chroma. And what they do is they have something called the Sky Portal, and it is bright light, but it's also balanced with red. If you want to if you want to put this together yourself, DIY, you could use blue light and then balance that with red just to a little bit interrupt the kind of cortisol producing effects that that huge shot of blue light could have. And in nature, we would never, ever, ever just have that much blue light without the presence of the other spectrums of light, including especially and importantly, red and infrared light, which can be more healing and kind of calming to the body. So that could be a happy medium as well. And I know we've got a lot of questions in the chat, so I hope I'm not skipping
No, you're
over
doing great. You're
anything.
doing great. I'm
Okay.
I'm I'm layering them in as you go. So
Okay,
my
thank you.
my questions are kicked off. This isn't about
Beautiful.
this is about
All
this.
right.
So and when you say get out and get that sunlight early in the day, or like that 10 minutes or that 20 minutes, then going for the walk, I'm assuming, but want to verify that do it without sunglasses. Like
Yes.
sunglasses would essentially block that, correct?
Oh, 100%. Listen, I used to be a person that sunglasses were life, New Yorker, had all the sunglasses, had all the things. And turns out that we're discovering that this is particularly impactful for circadian health because we know that, especially, we've got tons of research on how impactful the light into the eyes is. Now, there's emerging research and more evidence around what happens when the sun hits our skin, which is also very important in photoreceptors, but especially those eyes. And so we want to make sure that it's being unobstructed. The other piece about this too is contacts that have UV blocking kind of properties to them, glasses that are UV blocking. So ideally, you're getting so you can invest in contacts that don't have that. You can get glasses that don't have that. It's a little trickier, or even just putting them down a little bit on your nose so that you can just at some points get some of that light into your eyes unobstructed. But certainly skipping the sunglasses and using caution and being responsible, obviously, if you're driving or something. But this is a huge, huge difference. And we do find that so many people, it can take some time to kind of adjust from this. If you've been living a lifestyle where for years you really never had unadulterated light into the eyes because of how you've been using sunglasses or being inside. Because, by the way, in 2001, the EPA did a study and we found that the average American was spending well over around 93% of their time indoors. And that was in 2001, before a pandemic, work from
That's
home.
worse.
Right. So it's probably way worse. So if you are someone that's been in these dim environments, most indoor lighting is around sub 500 lux or so, which is incredibly low considering on a summer day near the equator, you can get up to 100,000 lux or more. So just think of the discrepancy there. And so if you've been in those environments with sunglasses, all the things, and then you walk outside, what do I hear so many people say? Oh, I can't do that. I'm too light sensitive. It hurts my eyes, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we don't want you staring into the sun, obviously. We're not trying to be crazy, but we're also understanding that if you are having that sort of response, what we hear and what we discover and what the research seems to point to is that you're actually likely a candidate for someone that needs more time out in nature, outside, getting that sun to adjust.
And so do you wear sunglasses at all? And if you do, when do you stop wearing them? You know?
I don't even own a pair of sunglasses anymore. What I own are blue blockers. And now blue blockers, that's a kind of convoluted or layered topic as well, because some people, there's been different studies that have used like things like clear blue blockers, and do know that clear blue blockers are insufficient for the what we're trying to achieve in the evenings. We need them to be orange or red in the evening so that it can fully start blocking significant amount of that blue light. And the part of the way to test this is you put those on, and if you look at blue light sources, can you see the blue? And if you can still see it, then we got to get you a different pair of blue blockers. But so those would be the types of lenses that now I'm wearing in the evening. So kind of we're flip flopping these things. And this is a big deal too if you're someone that travels a lot. And if you need to kind of hop different time zones, I have all of my clients that travel long haul get the Time Shifter app, and then they're bringing some of their darkest blue blockers. So, say like the red blue blockers, and they're bringing those into the airports. And then they're managing their light environment that way. And you can also wear like hats and kind of cover up so that you're getting less of that light source, and that you can actually learn how to time shift like a verb is kind of what's available there.
And what's interesting is a lot of us that have significant others or children, right? We
Yes.
have what we need for our sleep needs. And Blake might be dramatic, but I think I heard that you don't even have a normal light in your refrigerator. Is that correct? Like
Yes. Yes,
you have a
exactly.
different light in your refrigerator. So as we navigate these things, like you talk a little bit about this concept of sleep divorce, and your needs might be different than your spouse's needs. How do you manage or handle those
Oh,
conversations?
so good. Okay, so first to clarify the refrigerator thing, in case anyone's like, "What is that about?" So, for about $10 on Amazon, you can get these red films, like red film kind of plasticky thing, but it has a sticker on it. So you can get these, cut them all up, and put them over anything that's glowing and just annoying in your space. So I actually did the same thing with that same roll onto my Kindle that was too bright. I did that on like our AC. I'm looking at it right now, our glowing AC thingy, covered that up, and then also covered up the lights in the refrigerator. So listen, what we're trying to do, and we're not trying to instill for people some need for perfection or getting neurotic, but instead, what we see is that you just want to be aware that bright shots of light throughout the course of the evening can measurably deplete melatonin. And that's really what's at its core. And we have, there's one study that showed that even 30 minutes in ordinary room lighting depleted melatonin production by nearly 90%. So, for those of us that are thinking, like, should I supplement with melatonin? Like, oh, I'm having trouble falling asleep, staying asleep. Well, if our environment is just passively doing this to us, if we can take the time, it literally, I remember it vividly. Blake was sick. And I was a little run down. And so I'm just like, it was a Saturday, cut up all the little red things, covered up what I needed to cover up, and then it was done. And then I didn't have to think about it. So if you set this up in your environment, then it's kind of one and done. Now, sleep divorce. Our most popular podcast to date has, and now we've had the podcast running for over 4 years or so. Most popular podcast was not even some big name or anything, but it was because it was on the topic of sleep divorces, and clearly people are searching it or something.
Yeah.
And so what was available there is this was an expert who wrote the book Sharing the Covers. So if you're listening and thinking, oh, I need to learn more about this, there's a entire book on it, or listen to the episode. But what we discovered was this expert was trying to rebrand sleep divorce to be a sleep alliance, so that if you are someone that maybe your partner has sleep apnea, snoring, restless leg, or just on different schedules, goes to bed significantly later or earlier than you, whatever, they move around, etc., you have the opportunity or option to create a sleep alliance, so that there's lots of communication, and that we're sleeping potentially in separate beds, or maybe we create different divides, even like the kind of Scandinavian approach where you have two different duvets, so that you're not pulling each other, or even two different mattresses. That's kind of there's like a Japanese approach there. It's different ways that you can have that ability to protect your sleep if it's being impeded. And one of the pieces of information that this doctor pointed to, um, was that out of so much of the research, so many people would have this false kind of awareness around their sleep. And they would say things like, oh, I sleep so much better with my partner. We cuddle, it's great. I feel so much more at ease, safe, whatever. But then often they would look at their sleep results, and that wouldn't quite match with reality. And so actually their sleep would be more impeded when the other person would move or whatever. They would have these micro awakenings. But it's not to say that there's one perfect solution. So many people love to sleep with their other significant other. I sleep with my significant other. And so we have a lot of communication to find how can we, kind of make sure that our sleep habits align.
And then a lot of people right now are talking about these cold plunges and these saunas, right? Like I'm
Yes.
addicted to both of them. But there's a lot of research that has been coming out and continues to come out around doing those around bedtime. From your perspective, for the sauna goers and the cold plungers, is one better than the other, either to end your day or to start your day? And how would you think through adding those into your sleep routine?
Oh, so good. So the most general way to think about this and kind of best practices are cold by day, heat by night, which can sound counterintuitive because I just said this whole thing about you're trying to warm yourself up by day and, have the movement and all the things. And yet in the evening, markedly cool our body temperature because that's one of the signals and signs to the body that it's time to sleep is this dropping of our body temperature. So what we can do is if we are practicing things like cold therapy, we can know that there's a paradoxical effect after each one of these interventions. So, meaning that with cold therapy, there's a paradoxical warming effect thereafter, which is pretty cool, no pun intended, and an excitatory effect. So, we know that there's a bit of that dopamine hit and it seems to be sustained depending on how cold and how long you're in there. But either way, it's going to be more activating versus in the evening, what we find is if you can bring in heat therapy, and this applies to sauna, this applies to a hot shower, warm bath. Some people do like light yoga, like hot yoga, things of that nature. You do that in the evening, and then there's a paradoxical cooling effect thereafter to bring you actually cooler than you would have been without that intervention, which is pretty neat. It's almost like the body kind of over calibrates for you or something. If anyone's interested in this, we did a podcast with Eight Sleep and one of their head researchers there who had lots of information from many dozens and dozens of studies around temperature and sleep. And one of the protocols that they pointed to, which I thought was interesting, um, is the recommendation of 1 to 2 hours before bed, getting at least 10 minutes of heat exposure to help facilitate both falling asleep with more ease as well as staying asleep with more ease, and for some, even augmenting of total sleep time. However you cut it, it's like utilizing that heat in the evening, but still giving yourself a buffer time so that you are allowing the body temperature to cool and get to those cooler temperatures. But then also really recommending, or I highly recommend exploring some of the benefits of that cold therapy and how that can support sleep. Because one of the things that seems to be beneficial of many is that mitochondrial boost, the mitochondrial health of brown fat. And one of the things that we know is that it appears to be an advantageous goal for someone that's looking to really optimize their sleep, to optimize their mitochondrial health. So cold therapy can be a big passageway to that. Not to mention for men, a certain research pointing to potential benefits for testosterone. So both sleep and mitochondrial health and things like cold therapy seem to play a role in that testosterone conversation as well.
And the last question I'll ask, and I mean, I think we've done a pretty good job of answering most of these, but we'll share where people can find you and learn more because we could talk about this all day, right?
Totally. Yep.
Um, so many of us are operating from a position of sleep debt, and we don't really talk about that. We don't really want to share that. We don't want to say we're tired or anything like that. But from your perspective, what are the short-term implications, the long-term implications of sleep debt, and how do we go about getting out of it? And you're not going to get out of it overnight, right? You're not going to go from sleeping 6 hours to sleeping 10 hours instantly.
Yeah.
But what actions and moves can we take to offset those short-term and long-term consequences that you see with regards to the sleep debt?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that I think is important to bring to this conversation is that how I think of my conversations with people on around their sleep are that there's often two sort of buckets that people can fall into. And one is the people that I'm mainly working with, which are sleep optimizers. So they're sleeping and they want to just improve their sleep. They want to improve their HRV. They're not particularly stressed by their sleep or anything. It's just more a matter of setting themselves up for success, prioritizing that sleep, etc. Now, I will point to, in case anyone is dealing with this and listening, if they were dealing with insomnia of this persistent sort of difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, and maybe that's tipping the scales into things like sleep anxieties. And now this group is often really trying to sleep, and yet they're not fulfilling on that from a matter of a kind of a nervous system regulation and anxieties and other things that might be at play. So I call that out because they're actually a group that we might approach this a little bit differently, and kind of help lower the charge around the fears of sleep debt. because that can actually kind of be this double-edged sword where now they're
Right.
even trying to force it more. And then if anyone's trying to force sleep, like good luck.
Yeah.
It usually doesn't work out.
Doesn't work.
So we're straddling this tightrope. Now, if I'm talking to my sleep optimizers, often that's about like setting ourselves up for success. We're prioritizing that, are we giving ourselves sufficient sleep opportunity? Like if the recommendation is between 7 to 9 hours for a healthy adult to get sufficient sleep, and they're only in bed for 7 hours, well, right there we have a math issue because there's no way we're going to be able to
Yeah.
kinda get those numbers. Um, so if we're optimizing, we're getting clear on kind of our scheduling and making sure that we even are setting ourselves up for that benefit. Now, I do think that sometimes things like Whoop, especially that does that running sleep debt sort of total for you consistently, can be beneficial for those sleep optimizers, because then they're like, oh, okay, I got to really prioritize this. I'm going to have a whatever, set myself up for success tonight. Whereas our insomniacs, that could really bring about some stressors for them, and could be a bit of a problem. So, sleep debt, we know that we can never really pay back sleep debt. If you've been someone that's been kind of undersleeping for years and years and years, it's not as if we're then just going to have you go from a sleep need of 7 to now you're going to be sleeping 9.5 and somehow make up for all this. It doesn't really work like that. You can, on the short term, say if you just missed a little bit the night before or something, we often find benefits of things like rebound sleep, where you tend to get much richer sleep, maybe a little bit more sleep than is your normal. But we're talking kind of squeezing out small amounts. So, truly, I think the most beneficial piece is, instead of then trying to like make up for it on the weekends, which we see people do, and then we go back to that problem of an inconsistent wake up time. Instead, we want to just kind of have a whole paradigm shift around how we're managing our sleep and go for consistency, go for quality, go for kind of tiring ourselves out by day with movement, with sunlight, with nature, with kind of mentally taxing things from a purpose perspective. It really allows you to kind of create and design your life in a way that pulls for being spent by the end of the day so that you can sleep well in the evening effortlessly. And that's really what we're trying to go for, because unfortunately, that sleep debt piece, we can't pay it back too much. But you may have heard of the flip side of something called sleep banking. Sleep banking is something where we had the sleep Olympics, the coach for the Olympics, on the podcast twice. He's a fascinating expert. And so, one of the things that he'll do and have his Olympians do is bank their sleep in the days leading up to a big event, knowing that if you're, and this, maybe you're not Olympian, but maybe you have big things that are coming up, big presentations, big, I don't know, pitches, something that you got to do. Then you can almost anticipate that maybe you won't sleep the best in prep for that night. There's some pressure or whatever thoughts. So instead, you could sleep bank, where you're really prioritizing your sleep. You're abstaining from the glass of wine, the late night eating, all the other things that we might sometimes do, to bank the richest quality of sleep, so that then when that does come, when you have less sleep or more insufficient sleep, you're kind of set up more for success and the body can pull from those reserves. So this would be two ways of thinking about it: banking versus debt.
What's cool is like many circles are not having conversations like this. Like inside of the GoBundance community, inside of the communities you roll in, like high successful, high octane, high charging individuals that want to achieve success. Yes, they're talking about optimizing their day, but many of them are now talking about how to optimize their nights and come
Yeah.
into life more rested and more present, and trying to be more mindful of the rest that they're getting, which is really cool. It's really cool to have these conversations. But for many, this is a new conversation, and it can be very uncomfortable, right? Because it's like,
Sure.
what do you mean I'm not sleeping right? What do you mean I have a sleep disorder? What do you mean I need a sleep divorce, right? There's all these dramatic things that come into play. And so for people that have tuned in today and are listening to this, where can they learn more? Obviously, you shared a ton of resources. I'm sure on your website and in your newsletter, you talk about all of these things. Like, where can people find you? Where can people follow you, and where can people capture all of these action items or these to-dos that you mentioned today and slowly start to implement them in their lives?
I'm so glad you said that. And truly, my mission on the planet is to help provide as many people as possible with a sense of peace and freedom around their sleep and agency with their sleep, the ability to take action, to bring about more workability in this area, because I really believe that if all of us were to have a say in this area, know how much of a significant difference it can make in our lives, then a lot of things would be different on this planet. So if people are struggling, or if you're just curious, that's my other goal too, is like hopefully bringing about some intrigue, or dare I say fascination, with this thing we do. A third of our lives, on average 26 years, are spent asleep. For the entrepreneurs, it's like we have all these goals at the new year, but 4 months out of our year we're going to be asleep. So if we're not doing it well, that's going to fall in and domino effect into the rest of our results. So if that's you that wants to either just learn more or really dive in, at sleepisaskill.com, there's lots of things you can do. You can take a sleep assessment and get information auto triggered back. We have a weekly sleep obsessions newsletter that's been going out for almost 6 years or so, every Monday. Never miss a Monday. So I'd love to have people on there. It's a really great area to just kind of have a dialogue going. I respond to every email. It might take me a little bit of time, but I respond. And so there's that. We have the weekly podcast. So you can listen to all kinds of different experts there for free. And then if you're looking for more, if you want more support, we have a couple different ways that we work with people. We have cohorts, that those happen every few months, and then it's an 8-week long period of time. You wear either an Oura ring or a Whoop band throughout that. And then we get to really dive into your numbers and get some measurable changes with your sleep. And then we also have things like audits. So we can audit your wearable trackers and help provide tangible information right away. And then one-on-one options as well, if people like really want to get that support and dive in.
I just also want to touch on the workshop, because I've heard so many people talk about your sleep as a skill workshop. Cindy mentioned it too in the chat. Like, I know that
Oh,
it's changed a lot of people's lives, and candidly, I'm probably too afraid to work with you. I just don't even want to get kicked in the teeth by you with how poor my sleep is or my routines around the sleep. But I'm very grateful for you spending time today, pouring into GoBundance, pouring into this community, pouring into people that just tuned in and listened in. I think this is something we all need to have more conversations around and focus on. And so I'm grateful to know you, grateful for your time today, and really look forward to continuing the conversations at things like the Austin Entrepreneurial Summit, which we're excited to have. Hopefully you and Blake speak at, and doing more things together. So appreciate you, and thank you again for your time.
Oh, that means so much. Thanks so much for saying that. The feeling is mutual. Blake and I were on our morning walk this morning, getting our sunlight, and I was talking about the day ahead, and he's like, "Oh, Matt's great. It's such great vibes." And the same thing about GoBundance. Like, everyone has just been so incredible. So I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to share my favorite topic, and to have that response of people having that interest. It's just the best. So grateful.
Well, but Blake's been pushing hard for bees, so he's my hired beekeeper. He doesn't know it yet, but he's the hired beekeeper. So I'm waiting for Blake to come out to tell me where the bees are going.
Oh, it's on. It's happening. I love it.
All right, Molly. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
Awesome. Thank
Thank you,
you. Thanks
ma'am.
all.
See ya.
Bye.